Hello again. Another episode of RPH. This is Melanie Yazzie, joined by my co-host Elena. If you want to say hello, Elena.
Hello.
As usual, I'm calling in from Minnesota here in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. It's beautiful here. The fall is really finally really hit last week. The trees are turning. It's been sunny the last 2 days. Yep, I'm really enjoying the fall. I'm really not looking forward to the winter. It's supposed to be a rugged one.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, there's going to be a polar vortex cruising through here again. Yeah. Mm. And then daylight savings time is happening in like 2 weeks. I don't like it. I just don't like it.
I don't like it either. I mean, it's been beautiful here, and of course, it's cooler, but nothing like up north. And we don't have that many deciduous trees, so I can see the leaves are turning. I can drive up to the mountains and see the leaves, but we don't. We're in pinon and juniper. We don't have a lot of deciduous trees except our one lone apricot tree that we love. And yeah, I love fall. I mean, I also am not crazy about the deep dark winter, but I love fall.
Yeah. I think fall might be my favorite season, actually. I wish it lasted longer. Like
I know.
the real heart of fall kind of only lasts for like 2 or 3 weeks.
It's true.
Then it's
It's true.
over.
And it's like green chili here. It's all measured by the green chili season, so it starts coming in the end of August, and
Mhm.
really pretty much end of August through September. But then October, the first part of October is like almost you're almost out of that harvest season.
Yeah, I just remember like the aroma of green chili roasting. Like you could smell it all over Albuquerque. Like Albuquerque smelled like roasted green chili.
Yep.
Like, yeah.
And if you buy it roasted and put it in your car, then your car smells like green chili for weeks. It's my favorite thing. Then I get in the car and like, oh, it smells so good.
Man, I miss green chili. Yeah, people here don't really eat chili in the same way. But fall here is very beautiful. I've come to like deeply appreciate it, actually. Hmm.
Yeah, with all the trees and all the leaves and I mean the big trees, the grandmother trees. That's something.
Yeah, it really is. It's stunning, actually. And I feel really grateful to be around it. Well, fall talk aside, we are finally recording our episode about Chief of War, which we've been promising for like a month, like 3 weeks. We tried really hard actually to get somebody to join us today who has worked on the show, but just scheduling lots of kind of ships passing in the night kind of things. It just didn't happen, and we decided to move forward with recording anyway. So Elena and I spent a solid 20 minutes before hitting record making sure we got all of the characters and their names correct because I apologize ahead of time for maybe some of like the messiness with how
Me
I,
too.
yeah, I feel actually quite embarrassed about it, but
To our Kanaka relatives, if we butcher the names, forgive us. It doesn't come easy off the tongue, and but know that we really did try.
we like really did. I mean, this is a 9 episode first season, so we dedicated 9 hours to watching the show, and I watched all of the bonus content that the creators Jason Momoa and Thomas Paʻa Sibbett put together, or like listening to some of the actors who play the main characters. I even like looked up the history of Kamehameha the First and did a bit of background research just to understand like the importance of this particular period for Kanakamali people. So we've invested a lot of time, I think, in preparing for this episode, even though I still feel like incredibly unprepared in terms of the language. But if you listen to our episode about the wind and the reckoning, this is a continuation of that kind of awkward relationship with the Hawaiian language, which is stunning. It's like stunning and also very prominently featured in Chief of War, but nevertheless is not it's not my specialty.
It's beautiful to hear it, and it's it's interesting too in both The Wind and the Reckoning and this. Like I got to the point where I could could tell who were the actual native speakers and who had been taught it just for the film. And like hats off to those people because it cannot be an easy language to learn. So hats off to those people. But for the native speakers, it was really beautiful to hear and made my heart glad every time to know that there were people who had grown up speaking it and were continuing to speak it and hopefully passing it along, because that's amazing.
Well, there's a lot to talk about with this series. Maybe we can just start there with the language, but also with the cultural, like the portrayal of Hawaiian culture and tradition and spirituality, I guess, in the show. The language, it was so incredibly rich. Like when
Hmm.
they made those sleds, and like this was a real thing. Like okay, hats off to Kanakamali people. Y'all are like hardcore. Just like sledding down the side of like a volcano or something on these, and these were real. Apparently, I looked this up, but a Kanakamali artisan who actually is trying to bring back this sport of sledding. I don't know what the name for it is in Hawaiian, but these like how wide was that sled? It was maybe 8 inches, maybe 8 inches wide, and you have to put your entire body on it, and you're going, I think they would get up to like 90 miles an hour or something at a certain point. And there was an actual, I think it's in a Molokai, on the island of Molokai, but there was one of these like sled these runs down a mountain that was discovered, and the end of that run was a 200-foot drop into the ocean. And so they would literally fly down the side of a mountain on gravel on this like very thin sled, and then they would just like fly into the ocean. Cliff.
Yeah.
I was like, holy shit, that's the most metal thing I've ever seen. So just one. That was just one like extraordinary, I think, moment. Just celebrating. I think celebrating Kanakamali culture and tradition, politics,
And
governance, language, like yeah.
and I read that also so Momoa and Paʻa Sibbett, who were the producers, also all of the outfits were actually made in the authentic way, and every feather was an actual feather, and the canoes, the boats that they use were actually wood. They weren't dressed like modern craft dressed up to look at like wood. They were actually crafted out of wood, which is amazing. It yeah, it just showed a lot of the craftsmanship and the beauty and those outfits, the capes with the hats that the men wear. I mean, those are something. I kept looking at them, wondering what bird has those feathers, and like where do they get them? What is the story behind it? And like the same thing with Jason Momoa's the giant necklace he wears. It looks like
Mm-hmm.
talons. It didn't look like teeth. It looked like talons, which also gave me pause. Like there are some really big birds out there.
I think I watched all of the bonus content, like the interviews at the end of the show. There were only like 3 or 4, so there weren't ones for every single episode. But they described in that episode, or that bonus content, that the bird, I forgot the name of the bird, but the yellow, because there was like yellow, was a kind of like the chiefs and like the kings and the queens would wear more so than any other color. But that came from a particular bird that only had a few yellow feathers on it. Like the bird was not yellow. So they would have to capture the bird live, and then they would pluck the few yellow feathers out and let it go. And so those capes would take an extraordinarily long time to make because it was just a few feathers at a time from a bird.
And then when they let the bird go, did it regrow the feathers?
I have no idea. I have
I
no
mean, can
idea.
you imagine that poor bird is like, oh, the motherfuckers are coming to take my yellow feathers again.
Where's the story of the bird? No,
Seriously.
but yeah, apparently traditionally that's what it was. And so like this the specialness of that and like the amount of like work matched kind of like the stature, right, of those who would wear those capes. But yeah, the just the capes of like the chiefs and the kings and the queens were really stunning. Like you said, the hat, I forgot what the term is for those hats, just the authenticity, I think, and just like the quality. So the oh gosh, what are the no, oh my gosh, sorry. See, I'm already getting tongue tied with the terminology for things. But even like their temples or like the altars, what are those called? It's literally, it's not a totem. What is it? See, I'm already embarrassed. Those were hand carved actually by traditional, like people who specialize in those things. A lot of the artisans who worked on the outfits or the sets were Kanakamali or are Kanakamali people. And so one of the bonus content episodes I watched, Thomas Paʻa Sibbett, one of the co-creators with Jason Momoa, he was talking about how every step of the way they engaged in like ceremony and prayer with like everything that they made, asking permissions for certain things. I'm not entirely sure what that entails for Kanakamali people, like the cast and the crew or the creators and the writers, even some of the ones who are like non-native or like white writers, they would all be in a group and there would be like a song and prayers being offered and offerings. And it kind of made me like, I know this maybe sounds cheesy, but it made me a little emotional to see that because I was like, it really hit home like how important this show is. I mean, we can all be kind of cynical about Jason Momoa and we can talk about we can talk about that. I know I've heard a lot of like my Polynesian like comrades and colleagues, you know, have really mixed feelings I think about like his place within kind of elevating like Polynesian life and culture and history and stuff like that within the zeitgeist or like pop culture. And he's like a complicated figure, but it's very obvious that there was an extreme amount of care that was put into this and a lot of like it's like a love story to Hawaii is kind of how it felt. But from a Kanaka Maoli perspective. And so it just had a really different feeling to it that was as just a non-Kanaka Maoli indigenous person watching it just made me I had a different feeling about it that was really positive and empowered and just like deep appreciation.
Yeah, I read an interview with one of the women, of course, right now I don't remember which one, but she's Maori. So she's from New Zealand and she played one of the main female parts. And when she I think it was Kapui, when she auditioned for the part, she said she was very nervous because she said, you know, I'm not Hawaiian, I'm not Kanaka, but she said not that they assured her that they were trying to hire all Polynesian people to do, and they couldn't all be Kanaka. So she said at the same time, she felt anxious about whether or not she had the right to tell her ancestors' story. And when I read that, I thought, that is such an indigenous thing to say. Like, do we have the rights to recount this, to recount these stories? She felt very protective of it. And that also made me feel like they went into it with an intentionality that you can only have if these are your people, if these are your relatives and your ancestors. So yes, Jason Momoa, you know, I think is his own sort of force of nature and not necessarily always in a good way. But the fact that they went about it in a positive way, in a caring way, and an intentional way does make me feel a lot better about the show.
Yeah. You could tell just with the interviews with all of the actors, everyone seemed so incredibly grateful to be involved in the project. Or when they like found out or auditioned or were asked to play certain roles, just being like, wow, this is like a once in a lifetime opportunity to do this, to play these like extremely important, revered figures within like Kanaka Maoli history, to be able to do almost all of it within the language, even if they weren't fluent, or native like Hawaiian language speakers. And yeah, everyone, it seemed like a community. It definitely seemed like a, a group effort. And I think Paʻa Sibbett said that this is the most Polynesian actors ever portrayed on screen or who have ever been involved in a project in the history of film and television. Which is again a pretty big deal. I'd say it's a pretty big deal, especially if they were prioritizing Polynesian actors to fill these roles. So again, just like, yeah, I think the intention, you can feel the intention in the care with the language, the care with the outfits, the cinematography, all of the different aspects of like the cultural and the political, and like the social portrayal, the whole world. They built a whole world. They rebuilt a whole world. And I felt like it wasn't a caricature or an approximation. I felt like I was actually watching. I was like kind of transported back in time. I was like, I feel like this was actually what like, the islands looked like at that time and what people look like. And that was really cool. I think as an Indigenous person to see this. Paʻa Sibbett did say that at that time, traditionally, women would not actually have been wearing as much as they wore in the show. But he said, like Hawaiian women are so hypersexualized within like the American imaginary. He's like, it was a quick decision to like cover them more because we were not going to allow that to happen, with this show. And even that kind of statement right there, I'm like, only Indigenous people, like only like Kanaka Maoli filmmakers would really have that, as they would understand that so seamlessly, and then how to move forward with portraying, Hawaiian women in a show like this, because of, like the important work of like Haunani K. Trask, right, and these other like, incredible figures in the history of like Hawaiian intellectual traditions, who were able to write so extensively and talk so extensively and politicize people about the portrayal of Hawaiian women and the relationship of that to like the exoticization of Hawaii. And so it must have also been a lot of responsibility to portray Hawaii, knowing the baggage of how most Americans think of Hawaii, right? They just think of Hawaii as like a vacation spot. They do exoticize Hawaii. Most of the time, the struggles of everyday Hawaiians are not paid attention to. No one even knows that Hawaii was illegally annexed, that it is actually an independent kingdom by international law, that the United States illegally occupies Hawaii, that the military has like profoundly polluted the land and displaced the people. Like there's just a lot of even the more contemporary history of Hawaii that people don't know, and they just don't care. They just see Hawaii as like a Hawaiian Disneyland. Just like
Yep.
Santa Fe is Pueblo Disneyland, they see Hawaii as
Yep.
like, Hawaiian Disneyland. And so this show is showing a part of like pre-colonial Hawaii that is still stunning and beautiful. And you're seeing these like beautiful Kanaka Maoli people, right, doing their thing, running their kingdom, having this extraordinarily sophisticated way of life. And I think it must have been on their minds, like how to portray that without allowing most of the viewers are probably like the settler gaze, without allowing
Yeah.
the settler gaze to get away with that fuckery that they're always getting away with when they treat Hawaii like their tropical Disneyland. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I think the diversity too in amongst the people was really beautiful to see, and the different, they really I think to Western people, particularly to European Americans or Westerners, they see the homogeneity of Hawaii, like, oh, it's just one place. But actually the different islands had different cultures, and they all, and I'm going to compare this to the Pueblos because in a way, you know,
Hmm.
Europeans don't understand how, like, Taos Pueblo, which is the northernmost, and say Zuni can have totally different languages, but pretty much the same culture, and I mean the same culture in certain aspects. But it's fairly easy to imagine historically that people traded, they visited with one another, but they also were very independent of each other. And they had their own way of gathering food, hunting for food, fishing for food, growing food. And it was all dependent upon, which particular island you were on and what their natural resources were. So of course these folks would have been independent and fiercely independent from each other, getting along where they needed to, but also, being a bit divisive. It was good to acknowledge that and to see, I don't know a better way to say this, but seeing the Kanaka being Kanaka and not being seen through the settler gaze. I wish we had someone who was Kanaka. I was curious about sort of what I kind of attributed to Jason Momoa, which is the hyper masculinity. And
I totally did. That's where I attributed it to. It's
um
kind of dumb.
and
It's not
first
nuanced at all.
the first episode, it was like, oh my God, there's just Jason Momoa's butt in every shot. And we know, if you watch pop culture at all, that Jason Momoa likes to strut around without any clothes on. And he's done that on, I don't know, I read somewhere, some talk show he walked on totally naked. And oh, I guess maybe it was Saturday Night Live. He just was walking around the set completely naked. So we know Jason Momoa likes to walk around, with his butt hanging out. And then there was that weird, which I found weird, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was just me. Like when he was being chased, he was under attack and he jumped off the cliff, lands in the ocean, and gets picked up by this boat. He takes off with these settlers, and he ends up in the Spanish Canary Islands. And he learns English. He learns about firearms. He finds Vi, the Hawaiian expatriate, the woman, and all of a sudden he's wearing pants. And I understand why he's wearing pants in the Canaries, of course, because everyone's wearing pants. But then when he comes back, he's wearing pants. And to me, that seems significant, but I'm not quite sure why, because the first two episodes he was strutting around, with his butt hanging out, which I think was probably the correct outfit. That's how they dressed, because why would you wear more clothes than you had to? It was hot and humid. But there was a shift there. There's more English spoken, kind of at strange times. Like, I would
Yeah.
understand English being spoken when they're speaking to settlers, or Tony, who was the black man that came back with them. I could understand why English was spoken then, but I didn't understand why it was spoken when it was just the Kanaka people. So there were some things that confused me. One of them was the whole pants, and the other one was the English being spoken. But I think Kaiana being, that's Jason Momoa's character, Kaiana being the one, along with Vi, who, there's a line in one of the episodes after he comes back and he says, you don't know what's coming. These people are evil. And his experiences among the settlers and among particularly the naval people in the Canaries, who are always out for a buck. They're like the first hardcore capitalists. And he sees what's coming, and he goes from this person who abhorred war. He left with his family, left Maui because he didn't want to be involved in war. And they are living this sort of idyllic life. In the opening scene, they're out fishing, shark catching. I don't know exactly if that was like a fishing ritual or if it was actually a different ritual, but they're out there and he drugs a shark and he rides a shark and it's very cool. And it's like this idyllic life. And then he gets called up by Kahikili, who's the king of Maui, who calls him back because he wants to be the great unifier. He believes this prophecy that says that a man will be born who's going to unify all of the Hawaiian Islands. And he talks Kaiana into coming back and fighting for him. So Kaiana gets pulled back into sort of the war. And when Kahikili shows his true colors, which is he's a sadist and he's an insane guy, it's right about that time that he gets taken off to the Canaries, and he realizes that not only do they have enemies within, but they also have enemies without. I mean, there's the insanity of Kahikili and Kaiana recognizing that he should not be king. He should not be the unifier, or he wasn't going to be the unifier because he's crazy. But also the settlers are crazy and they're coming. And I don't know why I just rambled on about all that. I started out with butts and pants, but there's so much going on. And
Yeah.
and I think Kaiana, who was historically an actual person, and he was described by some Kanaka as being like almost Jason Momoa. I mean, they said he was 6'5" and like, really strong and an incredible warrior. So it kind of describes Jason Momoa. But in the show, he also and I didn't find anywhere where it said that Kaiana had visited other areas, that he'd like been taken to the Spanish Canaries or anything. So I don't know if that was something that was made up, but he definitely in this show is the one who's warning them about the impending doom, and settler colonialism and what he sees as the absolute evil of these people.
Gosh, what to comment on first? Yeah, so if you look at like the advertisements for the show, Jason Momoa is like, it's Jason Momoa, Chief of War, and almost like Jason Momoa's Chief of War, right? And of course he was the co-creator, and he plays the main character. I think that he's probably considered the main character. And apparently he had a conversation with the co-creator, and Thomas Paʻa Sibbett, about playing Kamehameha at first. And then they quickly realized that like Jason Momoa ain't no Kamehameha. Like they needed to find somebody else for that. And he himself acknowledged it. But he's I think he fits pretty well as Kaiana, who is also a very revered figure, is my understanding. For all of the reasons you articulated, in kind of Hawaiian history. And so what am I trying to say? He might be Kaiana, yes, is like a very important figure within this epic that is unfolding in this really pivotal moment of history. This is the unification, right, of the kingdom, essentially. This is the creation of a kingdom. And they even said that like Kahikili, the chief of Maui, was a formidable, like he's portrayed as being insane and sadistic in the show. I don't know if he was actually that, but he was an extremely powerful and capable leader. And they said he could easily have actually won this battle. And what we now understand as Hawaii would have been Maui. Like we would call it Maui if he had won and become the unifier. And so, so Jason Momoa's character, Kaiana, is kind of like in between all of these spaces. He's in between Maui, he's in between Hawaii. He had gone to Kauai with his family before he was asked to return. He's been like with these settlers. He spends with a year with them. And so he's kind of like the only character that kind of moves between all of the worlds, and has engaged in like battles with everyone. And so that he's very central, but I think I guess what I'm trying to say is that I don't really know, or I don't know enough about the history of this particular time to know if like this hyper masculine warfare was really how like things got worked out. Do you get what I'm saying? Like we all know that like the invasion of like Europeans into Hawaii was like extremely violent. Like there's this massacre, the Olowalu massacre. It's the episode 6 or 7, the Day of Spilled Brains episode. This is like a real massacre, right? And so there's a lot of violence in the show. We should talk about that. So there's a lot of violence in the show, but there's a lot of like warrior culture in the show too. And I feel like that's because the show centers on Kaiana. Or maybe it's not. You know, maybe there are some Kanaka Maoli people listening to this who can correct me that was in fact what was happening. It was like a bunch of bros. It's like a bunch of
Yeah.
men just fighting and like doing really horrific things to each other. Like there's a lot of really graphic violence and graphic battle scenes. Women were warriors too, which I also thought was very interesting. Fierce women were fierce warriors who would run into battle with their other with the men and their other comrades. But there's just like war. I guess war is like maybe the main character of this show. And there's something about that I didn't entirely like it, but I also can't tell if that's just like some weird sensibility that I have as a viewer. There's just like, oh, look at these. Like, yes, these people are like, they have a sophisticated like life in this, in the 1790s when this story is taking place. But look how like savage and brutal they are to each other. What was the law where um the consequence of making a certain kind of transgression, even if it was a mistake, was like instant death? And Kamehameha actually outlaws that at the very end of the show, and he was like famous for outlawing this. I forgot what the name of that is, but I don't know if like the portrayal of like the severity, I guess, of that violence is true, or if it just kind of is portrayed that way in the show because of like the man butt syndrome, like the the hyper masculinity and this kind of glorification of
Yeah.
the warrior figure. But I don't know, were like Hawaiian people like that? I mean, they did fucking
And,
like dry bobsled down mountains and shit. So maybe they were like that. I don't know. Even the way that Kamehameha is introduced, he's carrying a rock and he goes down to the ocean bottom with like 6 other dudes, and it's a competition for who can hold their breath the longest and carry the heaviest rock. And I'm like, cool. Like
yeah,
who can
and
slay
I
the
mean,
biggest shark? I don't know.
I think that to me made sense, and the shark riding the shark made sense. I mean, the Maori rode whales. Um, but I wondered when I was watching with all of the opposition between the kingdoms, between Maui and Kauai um, and Hawaii. I wondered if a lot of that was a result of pressure from settlers already starting um, to impact the daily lives of the Kanaka. Like, um, was there some sort of internal strife because of pressure from the outside? Because you said this, so this was in the late 18th century. So this was 20 years after Captain Cook was blessedly
10,
killed.
15-ish, I think, is when.
10, 15. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they knew about settlers. They knew what, even if they didn't know exactly what was going to happen to their homelands, they had an inkling that these people were out there and that they were going to not go away. But I don't
Okay,
know. Yeah,
that's huh. Huh.
I wish I knew too. I mean, because there was like that. It felt overdone to me that the hyper
Yeah, it did.
masculinity was felt overdone, and even though I think the two producers, Momoa and Paʻa Sibbett, really tried to um, sort of throw in some feminist, you know, characters. Kapoi, who's Kaiana's wife, is described as being a chieftess of war.
Hmm.
So she was a renowned warrior herself, and um, and Kahumano is Kamehameha's wife, and she's also sort of portrayed as a politician, and
Mm-hmm.
she guides him and counsels him, and he seems to have a lot of respect and affection for her, so that you do have those two characters that really epitomize, I think, sort of strong female Hawaiian Kanaka women. But I also wondered, like, is what really were traditional female roles in this time period in Kanaka history? I mean, were there? We know there was Queen Lilia Kalami, because I'm going to butcher that. Lilia Kalami. Okay, sorry. Apologies for butchering that. She was a queen. She was the last queen of Hawaii. So, were there other queens before her, or was it always these kings? And if so, what did the queens do? Were they queens? Were they? I mean, we know they were warriors. We know they were women warriors. But were they diplomats? Were they politicians? Did they have a women's council? Like, was it anything like the Haudenosaunee? I mean, like, that's kind of what I wanted to know. With all of this hypermasculinity, I wanted to see more of the women and more what the women's roles were.
I'm trying to pronounce their names correctly. Kupuohi, Kaiana's wife, the chiefess of war. She's obviously in love with him. I mean, he disappears for a year when he goes to the Canaries, and that's when he learns English and puts on pants, And so she ends up, like falling in love with his bestie because they're still back on the islands together. Um, so she's in love with Kaiana, but then after Kaiana wins the battle for Kamehameha against Kioha, who's like really, really pissed off that the god of war has been given to Kamehameha when it's supposed to have been given to Kioha. So they're battling for who gets to rule Hawaii, the island of Hawaii. And so the very end of the season is this epic battle on the lava fields um, between like Kamehameha's army and Kioa's army. And then, of course, Kaiana is leading Kamehameha's army because he's chosen Kamehameha of all of these figures, like because he knows like what's coming. He knows the danger, right? He's like moved between all of these different spaces, and he finds, I think, that Kamehameha is the most like honorable. Like he's the one who's actually going to fulfill the prophecy of uniting the kingdom. And we can talk more about Kamehameha here in a bit because he's actually, I think, maybe my favorite figure, male figure in the show. But the reason why I'm telling this story is that at the once you find out that Kaiana has survived that battle, he has this like epic showdown with Kioha. Kioha, Ka'ahomanu, who is the politician. She's also a very famous, very important figure in Hawaiian political history. Right, she's one of Kamehameha's wives, and she's also a very main character, very important character in the show. She kind of runs up to Kaiana, and you can tell that they've like fallen in love with each other, and you can kind of see snippets of their love story unfolding in the last few episodes of the season. And so, what I'm trying to say in a very long-winded way is that you have Ka'ahumanu, who, in and of her own right, was like she made a lot of the decisions that like Kanaka
Yeah.
Maoli people that had a leg. She had a legacy. She actually ruled longer than Kamehameha. He died before she did, and she was powerful, is what I'm trying to say. She was a very powerful person in the figure of like post unification Hawaii. and in the process of unifying Hawaii. But she falls in love with Kaiana, and then Kopoihi is also in love with Kaiana. And so you have these two like extremely powerful women. One's a warrior and one's a diplomat, essentially. But they're still kind of like routed through their love for Jason Momoa. Do you get what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And so it's like it just kind of feels like it's like the world kind of revolves a little bit too much around Jason Momoa, I think is what I'm saying. As the chief of war, because he is the chief of war. Like his father was a chief of war and he walked away from it, took his family to Kauai at that time. But then he's like been pulled back into this like epic battle for the unification of Hawaii and like trying to resist, the onslaught of settler violence that's coming. That's like the specter on the outskirts of the show. And so yeah, what would a story about like the chiefess of war have been?
Yeah.
Because yeah, those women like were very powerful and very, very influential. It wasn't just Queen Kamehameha who was overthrown, when the Hawaiian kingdom was overthrown 100 years later, a little over 100 years later.
Well, I think it's yeah. I mean, I get that men struggle with creating strong women characters, and there were no female writers in this show at all. But you're
Mm.
absolutely right that both of those women, both of those really strong women, Kahumano and Kapui, only seem to exist in relation to their men. So Kahumano is Kamehameha's wife, but also in love with Kaiana. And Kapui is Kaiana's wife. She's also the chiefess of war. And yet, her story is only told in conjunction with Kaiana. So I know, at least I think I know, that this is going to continue. This is going to be an ongoing series. So my suggestion to those two bros is to hire some women writers and really flesh out the female characters, because I think they're doing a disservice by not having those characters more central and by not having them really be more have more focus and be more fleshed out. When you get to the point in a show where the other male characters are saying to Kaiana, yeah, and all of a sudden you're wearing pants, like there's been too much focus on Jason Momoa's butt. Because it's even, I think it's Kyoha when they meet on the beach, and he says to Kayana, he says, "Oh, and now you're talking like a white man or a pale skin or whatever. You're wearing pants and you've got a gun." And it's like, to me that was like, oh God, here we're focusing on Jason Momoa's genitals and his butt. I don't want to, I really don't want to know anymore about this. That's not particularly interesting to me. Like, I really want to know more about Kahumano and what her life was like. Kapui does survive the final battle. It's her sister, Hiki, who dies, I think, and she's the one who was in love with Kaiana's other brother, who was
Nahi.
Nahi, and
Nahi.
yeah, and she's the one. Hiki is the one who gets raped by one of Kyoha's warriors, and I also thought that was kind of an unfortunate scene in that it happens. It's not trauma porn. You don't see it on screen, but it happens, and she runs back to the camp, and her sister Kapui is there. So it happens. It's implied, heavily implied. But to me, it never went anywhere after that, which I think is unfortunate. It seemed like it was just gratuitous sexual violence against a female character with
Hmm.
with no um with no consequence.
So I actually couldn't tell if the character who raped her was with Kyoha or Kahikili. He's just like a crazy warrior who just seemed really sadistic and was kind of like the attack dog. that would be
Yeah.
sent out to do like really horrible things to people. Um, Brutally murders Kaiana's brother,
Yeah.
Nahi, and then rapes, Hiki, who's a lovely, she's like a farmer. She's always out
Yeah.
in the fields doing taro, planting
And
taro and working
gathering
with the taro
medicine.
and yeah, gathering medicine. She's actually like a lovely person. Um, and actually so is Kaiana's brother. Nahis is like kind of a lovely person. Have Kahikili, who has taken over Maui. He just kills. He just kills a bunch of women and children. And like you see this, like you watch them die, and then he builds like a temple out of their skulls and bones. And then he gets like really yoded at a certain point in the show. He starts to take
And they
some
have
sort
an
of hallucinogenic,
orgy.
and then they have an orgy.
Yeah.
And then even Kyoha, the one who's like really pissed off that Kamehameha got the god of war instead of him, and this is over in Hawaii that this is happening. And even the way that Kyoha acts, they just all of these men, they're just kind of like babies. I don't know. I could
Yeah.
be. I mean, I don't know if anyone. Maybe folks are going to get mad at me. I don't know if this is like in oral histories or whatever how these men were like talked about, because they're talked about as like these great warriors and these very powerful leaders. But how I felt the way that they were portrayed in the show is that they're just like incredibly fickle. They get butt hurt a lot, and then they make like really capricious choices because of their man feelings
Yeah.
and just dumb man things. There's a lot of like dumb man things. There's a lot of like dumb man decisions that seem to guide a lot of like the really drastic stuff that happens in the show. And I was like, why are we watching this? If this is actually what happened, if this is them trying to be historically accurate, who am I to say anything? But I was also just kind of like, this is like seems really gratuitous. Like even the brutality, like the joy, there was a lot of like joy in like crushing skulls and like taking your shark tooth mallet and just like slicing someone in half. It felt very like Game of Thrones sometimes.
Exactly.
It was like
Yep.
a Hawaiian Game of Thrones, and like in those moments I was like, this feels, I don't like this.
Yeah.
It's
And
my
and
least
then,
favorite thing about this show.
and there was a scene too. So I don't have his name written down, but maybe you do, Mel. So Kahikili's son, who's sort of the
Oh.
crown prince, is that
Oh
um
gosh, what's his name? Hold on.
Kapili? What? Okay.
Kapili?
Kapili. So he presents as gay. He has a male
Mm-hmm.
lover and
Kapuli, Prince Kapuli.
Kapuli. So Kapuli, he has a male lover. They seem to be out. No one seems to blink an eye. It's not really focused on, which is nice. Um, that it's not, there's no big deal made out of it because, of course, we know homosexuality existed everywhere, and most indigenous communities, like, were fine with it, and there was never any issues with it. But but then there's a scene where the male lover is telling him, "Your father's nuts. He's crazy. You need to do something, and you are the heir apparent, essentially. So why don't you do something and take the power?" And Kapuli says, "Well, yeah, but I don't really want to, and let's just see how it goes." And then they kill the lover. Kaikili kills the lover, and then he ends up killing his son. So there's just a lot of like really gratuitous violence that may or may not have happened. I don't know enough to say whether it did, but it just seemed like it was, sorry for the bad pun, but it seemed like it was overkill. Um, that like Kahikili with his temple of skulls and bones and just literally killing. They said at one point, you're killing the legacy, and that each one of these islands had their royal family that had a history and a legacy, and he's like wiping them all out to be this great unifier. And people are commenting on it that he's killing the legacy of all the islands, and then he ends up killing his own son, which, I just thought, if that's true, okay, I understand that. It felt like a lot to me.
I would say, uh, um, the actors who play Kaiana, Kahikili, and Kioa, all quite famous actors, Polynesian actors. Jason Momoa is one of them. Cliff Curtis, I think he's a Maori actor.
Yeah.
Um, I'm
He's
sorry if I get
something,
his name wrong.
he's
He's been
great.
in a lot of stuff.
Yeah, he was in that Maori film Once Were Warriors.
Mm-hmm.
And he was great. I think he was also in Whale Rider.
Oh, Whale Rider. I still
Yeah,
love that movie.
so did
Um,
I.
and I'm trying to look up the whole cast. Oh, even like Moku, the person who plays Moku, who's Ka'ahamanu's father, kind of a lower chief, but still the chief. I don't I don't really like the way those actors played those characters. They're very it was overkill. They overacted in those roles. Is kind of how I felt. They made them like maybe cringier
Yeah.
than they were supposed to be. I don't know. Maybe those men were really cringy, but I don't know. I'm not. I have to tell you, I struggled through the first 3 or 4 episodes of this show because I was like, I don't want to watch a bunch of cringy men doing dumb shit and then dragging a bunch of people in and like enjoying like really graphic killing, just raping and pillaging their own people. Like, is this the message? Is this what Kanaka Maoli people are like? Is this what they did? Everyone was just like at the whims of these like men who apparently were like great men. And I was like, I don't see great men. I just see a bunch of babies. Like that's really what was in my mind. And so I was like having a really, really hard time motivating myself to keep watching the show because of that very prominent factor or aspect of it. And maybe it's just because I'm like a Native woman watching it. And obviously I'm coming from a particular perspective, but I was like really annoyed with that. And yeah, it was definitely overkill. And it continued on. The reason why I kept watching it and I developed a different appreciation was because I watched the bonus content
Yeah.
and I read more about the history and I was like, oh, this is actually a really important story that has like never been told. Like the portrayal of the Day of Spilled Brains or the Olowalu massacre of 1790 on the island of Maui, like that had never been portrayed, or just the cultural, the care that had been taken with the culture and the language, or the fact that the entire cast was Polynesian and the biggest Polynesian cast in the history of TV and film. Like those things, I was finally like, oh, okay, like I'm gonna watch the last part of basically like 2/3 of this show, this first season, with a very different appreciation, and kind of tried to put that stuff that was really annoying me the first few episodes into the background. But it is like I found it really too much and like not
Yeah.
realistic, and I don't know like why. Unless that was actually historically accurate and someone can correct me because I don't really know. But yeah,
But
I
and
wasn't
you
into
said
it.
earlier, like Kamehameha was your favorite character. I mean, I loved Kamehameha um when you first see him. He seems like just this super mellow, almost like Yoda, like this just very wise, very quiet, not aggressive or assertive. When the king is dying and Kioha is there and he's being really assertive and aggressive, and Kamehameha is just like, yeah, whatever you want, we want you. He tells the old king, we want you to live a long time, and he just seems like he is not politically motivated. He doesn't want to go to war. He can be a warrior. He doesn't want to go to war, and it reminded me of a lot of the so-called war chiefs in Native history throughout Turtle Island. Like they weren't the way Hollywood portrayed them. I mean, and always, always, always the first rule of being a warrior is defense, is defending your people and defending the land and defending, the old people, the women and children, and your land and your way of life. And Kamehameha seemed to have that character, to be that character. And when he separates from Kioha, and he starts building these houses where they can store food, he is aware that there's a specter of war on the horizon, and that there is going to be violence, and there is going to be, whether it comes from settler colonialism or whether it comes from within. He's thinking, to me, like a true warrior. He's thinking about his people. He's thinking about putting food away so that his people don't starve. And so I think he was portrayed in a very positive light, especially when you contrast that with Kaiana and Kahikili, who just seemed like they just wanted to go out and kill each other.
And Kioa, yeah. They're just like amping each other up. It's just like a big old pissing contest happening. I felt like a lot of the plot. And I'm like, this is dumb. You and I noted when we talked about Paʻa Highway a few weeks ago, like, why is it that so much of like the history of like even native produced and written cinema and TV is about masculinity?
Yeah.
This is like another show. I was literally thinking this the first episode. I was like, okay, here's another show that's about indigenous masculinity. Cool. Yep. I mean, we're being given lots of different archetypes, I guess. And that's cool, but really do I have to sit through this again? This is like 9 hours of my busy life to dedicate to watching these bros throw down just because they're all like pee-pee hurt for not getting the chief of war, the god of war. Anyway, not getting their way. But Kamehameha, there's this scene. I really loved it. I forgot what kind of like pivotal war decision that they were making. Kaiana's like all amped up against Kioa, like the epic battle for who gets to rule Hawaii. Is it Kamehameha or is it Kioa? And he's like, where's Kamehameha? And then I think it's Ahomanu is just like, oh, he's off in the fields farming. I think doing taro farming. Yeah. And Kaiana's like, what the fuck? It's like, why is out farming? Like, we're at war. We need to be doing this. But there's maybe later that episode or the next one, Kaiana goes out and there's a scene, right, where Kamehameha's out in the paddies, farming, and he comes up and they have a whole conversation. And it's actually like a really important conversation where you learn a lot about Kamehameha's attitude towards leadership, towards masculinity. And like, I think in that scene is when Kaiana finally like really decides that he's going to back up and trust like Kamehameha as like, he is the prophesized one. This person has good judgment. He's defensive instead of offensive. He does not glorify war. But at the same time, Kamehameha's like very strong. He's not afraid to he's a real warrior, but he's like an angry man of peace, as we've said before, in the Red Nation. He's like a man. So Kaiana's like, yeah, I'll do this. Yeah, let's do this. He's like, I'm into this.
He's like Filbert. You just mentioned Powwow Highway. He's like Filbert. Like he gets the shit
very
done.
Wise.
Yeah.
He listens to women.
Yeah.
He really trusts Ka'ahumanu's counsel.
Yep.
I guess that actor, he's not an actor. He was just someone that they found to play that role and thought that he was perfect. Just like a majestic, huge Kanakamali, beautiful Kanakamali man who speaks the language fluently, from what I can tell. Yep. So he was like the perfect person to play like the great unifier of the Hawaiian kingdom. But even then I'm just kind of like watching it through this lens where I'm like, yeah, I like Kamehameha a lot, but do we have to watch another story about like, here's what a good indigenous man is, and here's what an annoying one is, and here's like one that's out of control. And I'm like, really? It's so unsatisfying.
And there's no nuance. Like,
that's what it is. There's no nuance with the masculinity stuff.
No, I mean, I can complain about not having any really evolved female characters, but even the male characters are not evolved at all. They're very stereotypical. They're very caricature, and there's no nuance in them at all. Like, um, Kioha and Kahikili are sort of the bad guys, even though Kioha is not as bad as Kahikili. Kaiana is sort of, he's angry, but you also figure he's been through a lot, having been taken away from the islands. So you kind of forgive him. But Kamehameha, is just, yeah, the wise sort of sage guy. They also are just stereotypes. They also don't really have any nuance to them. And um, so, like, kudos to these folks, to Jason Momoa and Paʻa Sibbett, for writing this and for telling this story and for using the Hawaiian language and for, doing this in a good way and utilizing Kanaka Maoli artisans and craftsmen. And like, there's so many kudos for this. And also, like, write some characters with depth, and not just the women, but the men too. Like, if we're going to have this for the next few seasons, like, let's have some real human beings.
And like some more like queerness. We don't talk about that enough either, but man, like indigenous film and television is like really bereft of queerness. Like really, really. It's
And
it's
when you have them,
it's
they get killed.
glaring.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you said,
Yeah.
they just get killed by these dumb men.
Yeah.
I'm really whatever. This is a historic series. It's incredible for lots of reasons. There's more seasons to come, I'm sure. I have no idea what the reception of it was by non-Indigenous or non-Kanaka Maoli people. I know that there was a lot of chatter online in the Polynesian community when this came out. So it's significant, and we'll, I guess, just see where it goes. But yeah, it'd be really. I don't think there's going to be less bro focus.
Not if
Probably, I
Jason
guess,
Momoa is in
given.
charge. Because he's just like the bro. I mean, that's what he is. I don't know if that's what he is in
Yeah,
real life, but on everything he portrays, that's what he is. And
yeah,
so, once again, I feel like we're in a position of, yeah, we want to see more content by Native creators. We want to see more content about Native history and Native stories and Native everything, but not just by dudes, and not just dudes narrating. Like, we need some women creative, we need some queer creatives, we need to see the other side of Native culture through non-masculine voices. Like, really, that's what we need. And it's great to see content created, but um we also want to see more stories with queer and women characters.
yeah. I was even just thinking as you were saying that the character of Vi, who's the expat that Kaiana encounters when he's gone for a year, and he meets her in the Spanish Canary Islands, and she comes back with him to her village on the island of Maui, and she kind of dresses like a man. Like she speaks English, she dresses like a man. She's kind of a swashbuckler. She's a hustler. She's like lived amongst like haole people for several years. She has a son, back in her village on Maui, but she returns with Kaiana. And so she's kind of like a little bit of a queer character, I guess, in my mind was how I was seeing her. But then she also just dies like
I was gonna say,
immediately.
yeah, then they kill her.
Then they kill her in
Yeah.
the
I
Olawalu
don't,
massacre.
yeah.
She gets like
Yep.
riddled with nails because that's what they actually did. They shot nails and
Yeah.
killed over 100 Kanaka Maoli, just village people who were on the shore that day. But she dies protecting her son. But And even that scene, like, so something that really hit me when I watched one of the bonus content episodes was Paʻa Sibbett, right, one of the co-creators. He's talking about the portrayal of that massacre, and he calls it their wounded knee. He's like, this was our wounded knee. And I was just like, oh shit, like this has never been people probably don't even know this happened. And for Kanaka Maoli people, this is a really big deal. Um, and to be able to portray it on screen is a really big deal. And so that's one of the things that kind of shifted my perspective on the show as I continued to move through it. And yet at the same time, there's this weird moment where Kamehameha is kind of like, okay, no. That massacre actually happened on the island of Maui, but I think in the show, it takes place on the island of Hawaii. Because Kamehameha is the ruler of Hawaii. And Kamehameha is having a conversation with Ka'ahumanu about like, what could I have done to protect my people? Like, I failed my people. And this is kind of where the season ends, actually. He's like in this place where he's just like, I didn't I failed to protect my people. And she says something that I found really weird, but she's just like, oh, it happened already. It's done. Like, you don't need to worry about it. And I was like, wait, what? Like in the show, like 238 people are massacred for no goddamn reason by these Scottish, I think like just these Howley men on a ship. And her advice to him is just like, oh, it happened. It's bad, but you know, bad things happen. That's kind of how I interpreted that comment. And I was like, this is a weird way to narrate this like very significant moment of settler violence. If this is your wounded knee, I don't think that one of the main characters of the show, her immediate response should just be like, shit happens. Like, it's not your fault. You know, like that's weird. That's a weird thing to say. And like the message that that conveys, especially to like settler audiences, is one of like apology. And that's weird. And also in my mind, I was thinking like, I if this is such a significant moment in your people's and your nation's, your kingdom's history, this moment of like colonial violence, then why have you spent the entire series demonstrating that you're kind of like you're kind of aiding and abetting like those talking points about how like, oh, native people are just really violent against each other anyway, because like look at all like how much they enjoy killing each other, because that's pretty much been the entire season up until that point. And so it's like here you have this exceptionally extreme moment of settler violence and colonial violence against these innocent Kanaka Maoli people, but yet like the Kanaka Maoli men are also committing extreme, exceptional violence against their own people. And so it's like, so is there like a politics of like, is there a critique of colonialism in this show? Because it just seems like it's just violence and the violence is equivalent. And and so it's just like, oh, we're in a time of war, so everyone's just going to be really violent. And I think the lack of politics behind that really bothered me.
Yeah.
And I feel like also might be a byproduct of like just men, kind of like cishet dudes, like writing a show about war. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and it also
Not it's
like
not nuanced enough.
it's definitely not nuanced enough, and it's also I think that they used that massacre as a device, a narrative device, because Kaiana tells Kamehameha we should let them stay for a while, and we should trade with them. And Kamehameha says no. And Kaiana says they won't leave easily. And Kamehameha tells them, get off our island. We don't want you here. And Kaiana, that's one of the ways that he proves to Kamehameha that he knows what's going on, because it turns out that he was right, that they just went around the island and massacred a bunch of people. So it felt to me like they used that as a narrative device instead of what you said, like this was their wounded knee. Like that, I think that should have been treated with a little bit more respect in a way. but I'm not Kanaka Maoli, so maybe I'm just talking out my ass. I don't know.
Yeah, again, this can all be taken with a grain of salt just because we're outsiders talking about this. But if one of the co-creators of the show said that that's our wounded knee, that's a loaded ass statement. Like
It really is.
that means that is like a major pivotal moment of colonial violence. Like that's something that fucking changed the trajectory of your people and American history. So anyway, yeah. So that was like a bit of a, I guess, just like a contradiction, and I guess we'll see if that continues to kind of. We'll see. I guess we'll just have to see how the writing goes for the next season. One other thing I wanted to talk about, I know we're at an hour and 15 minutes, is Tony, the character of Tony, and the solidarity. I don't remember if Tony is like formerly enslaved and has been freed, but he shows up on the islands. He's sailed there with these like, European and American. I'm assuming they're European and American. They seem to have Scottish accents, maybe Scottish, British, and American men, just white men. And he's the only black man, from what I can tell, who's on the ship. And he and Kaiana become friends. He's the one who teaches Kaiana English. He's the one who shows him how to shoot a gun. Especially after Kaiana ends up on the ship and goes with them for a year, kind of travels the world. And at one point when they're in the Canaries, Tom is captured by some white men and from assuming to be put back into circulation within the slave trade. And then Kaiana breaks him free. He rescues him and then brings him back to Hawaii with him. And then Tony fights next to Kaiana, by Kaiana's side, in the final battle in the lava fields in the final episode of the season, against Kiowa and his peeps. And so there's this like narrative of like Black Indigenous relationality, I think, also that plays out in the show, that is somewhat understated, even though Kaiana's like the main character, I guess, because it is like Jason Momoa's chief of war. Um, and so yeah, that's one more kind of like interesting political nugget, I would say, in the show. It also portrays like a lot of enslavement, I think, of Chinese migrants as well. And in Wind and Reckoning, it was like a Chinese. Oh, what is the term? I don't know where the term coolie comes from. Like what term, what historical period? But in the Wind and the Reckoning, you remember that the Chinese like laborer who was with
Yeah.
the Scottish and the British and the American settlers who come off that ship, and then he saves the Kanaka Maoli boy's life, and then they shoot him for it. And so
Yeah.
there was also this gesture to that kind of solidarity between like indigenous
Yeah.
people and arrivants, to use to Jody Bird's term. But so that's also happening a little bit in Chief of War.
Well, and Tony at one point says to Kaiana, he says, they don't see you for who you are. They see you like they see me. In other words, the settlers don't see you as Hawaiian or Kanaka. They see you as a potential slave or as a potential, you know, servant, someone to provide labor and from whom to steal land and labor. And that hit me when he said that, because I thought, well, of course we know that now, that that's exactly what settlers do, but the Kanaka didn't know that at the time.
So yeah, there's obviously interesting commentary about early capitalism, like, and how that's, the expansion of capitalism in the quote unquote new world at this time. Like you said, turning people and land into property, and the extreme violence of that conversion process. I'm sure that this is going to happen in later seasons, but I guess Ka'ahumanu, because I read a little bit about her, like the actual figure, the historical figure, she becomes like a diehard Christian
Ooh,
later on, and she tries to convert a lot of people. Yeah. A Catholic? Catholic?
yeah,
Yeah.
the worst.
So I think we're going to see also like, there's just a lot of like colonialism that is brewing in this moment. in other ways, and I have no doubt we're going to see that in later seasons. I mean, who knows how many years later or whatever the second season or the third season or whatever is going to be, after like Kamehameha actually takes over as the ruler of the Hawaiian kingdom. But yeah,
I think this is a great start. I mean, I think just the care that was taken with the series and the hiring of all Polynesian actors and all of that. I mean, I think it's off to a good start. It's great to see something like this. My wish would be for Jason Momoa and Paʻa Sibbett to like bring in some women writers, sort of define more of a politics around the
yeah,
series, and um and really hit hard on the settler colonialism and the impact that it had on Hawaii and the Kingdom of Hawaii and Hawaiian history. Like that's what I would like to see.
same.
We'll see.
Yeah, that's what I would like to see out of like literally everything we watch in the
Yeah.
canon of like indigenous pop culture. Like it hasn't done a very good job.
No.
Um, I think it like having feminist and queer stories and or like analytical perspectives or storytelling
Yeah.
methods, and having like a strong politics about settler colonialism. It's there's a lot of room for improvement.
And I know it's not popular and it's not done much, if at all. But like what about some critiques of the church? I mean, we know in the Southwest and well, in the Southwest and up north in Canada, I mean, it was the Catholic Church. And if the Kaumano becomes, a hardcore Catholic, then it's obviously, part of Hawaiian history too. But the destruction and the continued destruction of Native children, and just culture, indigenous culture by the Catholic Church is unprecedented, around the world. And it really needs to be critiqued. It needs to be addressed, and it doesn't need to be swept under the rug like so many other, um, you know, films about indigenous people. I mean, there are very few that I've seen that have an honest and hardcore critique of the Catholic Church.
Yeah, like a narrative film. We're not
Yeah.
talking about like Sugarcane, for example, which is a documentary.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, it'd be I think we're kind of seeing I'm still down for like indigenous storytelling on the big screen. Okay? Like I'm still down for that, and I'm down for marveling at like the cultural, linguistic and political accomplishments, of our indigenous forebears, or even in a contemporary way. I'm still down for humor, indigenous humor like you see in like Reservation Dogs. I'm still down for indigenous storytelling, but I feel like we're seeing some limits to like that, and how that kind of just stops at like a politics of representation. And I just want more as like an informed indigenous viewer, and a consumer who, I don't know, I feel like native people, indigenous people, not just native people, already have such a strong sensibility and a critique of colonialism. And and so yeah, I think having smart content, that's by indigenous people, like that's for indigenous people, that's really, there's a lot of room for improvement, I would say, with that.
Agreed.
Yep. Well, I'm actually pretty proud of us for getting all of the characters straight.
Even if
The
we butchered the
pronunciation was
names,
so dicey.
we did the best we could.
I think we got the facts correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Every time I looked this way, just for people watching this, is because I was looking at my notebook because I had
Right.
everything written down, and I actually had to keep looking at it to be like, how do you say that word again, or how do you pronounce that person's name?
Yeah, I
Um,
actually did it phonetically so that I would be sure not to butcher it worse than I did. So, yep.
yep, yep. Yeah, I kind of did the same thing. Um, cool. Well, thanks everyone for watching. Until next time, everyone. Thanks.